There are some gender norms that we don't fit them.
Make sure, like, you don't rely on a man.
There's nothing wrong with finding somebody attractive.
A lot of men are moving to the far right because they've been rejected, they've had enough.
90% of single-parent families are led by women.
We don't know how to flirt. No one's happy. Everybody is fed up.
Welcome to Roundtable. I'm Busayo, and today we'll be talking about a topic that's close to our heart, the gender gap. Now, we might have heard this phrase thrown about a lot, but what does it really mean and how does it impact us in real life? I'm excited to be joined by several guests today. First question, how has gender roles shown up in your community or talked about in your household growing up?
I feel like coming from a Moroccan household, it was all we spoke about. It was very clear that the man was kind of the man of the house, the head of the house. That's what they like to say. And the woman just kind of follows the man's lead. But growing up and maturing is realizing that that is inherently toxic and can be very damaging. I really believed that, men shouldn't be a certain way, or they shouldn't show their emotions, or the man always has it together, when really, real men show emotions. Real men show their vulnerability, their strength in showing vulnerability. And growing up in my household, that was never really portrayed to me. And it kind of affected my sort of dating and relationships. Like, some of the guys that I would go for example, would always be like the typical kind of alpha male, masculine man. And now at 30, I'm kind of starting to realize, maybe not. Maybe I should go for the healthy masculine man.
I grew up in quite a traditional house. So my dad was like the main earner, and my mum was the one looking after the kids and doing the cooking. So it was very traditional. And I remember her saying to me, she was like, Steph, you need to marry a rich man. And I don't remember how old I was, but I turned around and I was like, I don't want to marry a rich man. I want to be rich myself. Also, I grew up in a house where emotions were kind of shut down. That's something I'm working on as well, is learning to be more emotional and open.
I'm quite the opposite. Like, I grew up in a woman-dominated environment. So actually, the roles that I guess we typically assign to men, the women were doing it. And I went to a girls' school, so I don't know if anyone here's gone to a girls' school. That also shapes how you see gender sometimes, because the smartest person in the class, the fastest person in the class, the funniest person in the class are all girls. So therefore, there was no concept that we were second-class citizens. It's only when you step out, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And it makes you even slower to jump on the feminism wave, because you're like, what are you not complaining about? But when you mentioned being the man of the house, Ehiz, what does that mean to you?
I grew up in a Christian household, so a lot of the values that we have as a family were rooted in Christianity in terms of the Bible. It's the male, species, would you say, first, with the woman to follow. So, for example, stereotypically and traditionally, it's the man who's the breadwinner. He owns all the money, owns the most money in the house. He looks after, his wife and children. But sometimes circumstances happen. There's definitely been a lot of ups and downs in my family. My mum has always told my sisters, make sure, you don't rely on a man to provide for you, because, things can happen.
And it is quite toxic on social media, because even when you go on social media right now, it's always, oh, why is the man not buying me this on the first date and this type of things. We've actually realized that it was quite toxic sometimes, coming from cultural backgrounds. But I think as time's gone on, my parents have been able to listen more, and they've understood that we're living in a different era right now. So they're not as hard-headed.
I feel like the themes of religion has also played a part, and it's interesting to hear about how social media has also captured that.
Yes.
And now we're seeing how even the younger generation are interpreting gender norms. Can you relate to what he's saying about
Sure. I feel like for me, I'm the youngest out of 4. So I'm the last born, I'm 24. My eldest sister, she was quite one of the strong characters in our family, one of the strong personalities. And in terms of my family dynamic, I have my dad and my mum, but the women in my family are also as strong as the men. And although it was very traditional in terms of the norms and the characters, what I learned a lot, what we had to unlearn is men can also feel emotions as well. And as I've gone older and as my parents have unlearned, I've had to learn that I can process my emotions with my parents as well.
And do you recognise that not everyone has that kind of family setup that can be supportive of like showing emotions and talking to parents?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, particularly me as a young black male. There's the case of fatherlessness quite real, and I've had experiences with my friends or people around me, and I've seen that affect them. So in terms of how they grow up, it's the gangs around them, it's the people around them, it's the rappers. Like the musicians are modern day philosophers, and so whatever comes out and what they listen to affects them. And also with things like rejection, that really makes them turn to people like names like Andrew Tate or very hyper masculine guys to really, oh, okay, because I'm rejected, I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna grind, and it can be very toxic and draining. But I feel like we live in a time where people are tired of that, and people wanna feel emotions, and people wanna be honest. But there's also on the flip side a danger of people being too, I don't wanna say too sensitive, but it's like not getting help. They're just like, oh, just crying, like not trauma dumping, but it's like, oh, I'm going through this, but actually not finding solutions.
Yeah. He mentioned the intersection between gender and race, how it shows up in men. And I know as black women, you know, there are some gender norms that don't necessarily, we don't fit them in the standard way, and sometimes that really shapes how we're seen.
Yeah.
Would you like to share how that intersection works? And you know, we do a lot of work in this area as well around race, so it'd be good to find out more.
Yeah, so I run a racial justice campaigns organisation where we basically run national campaigns for racial justice. I'm an only child, and my parents are incredibly entrepreneurial, so it was never like, you know, you need to go and find a partner for this. It was more so like, L'Myah, like whatever you do, do it, but just make sure that you aim to get to the top of whatever field it is. And I guess that in terms of like gender inequality, I don't think I even really like noticed it until a lot later on, because I had very protective parents who would drill like these ideas into me, probably from like nursery onwards. And I guess I think also the whole notion of a male breadwinner is particularly interesting because of the fact that most single parents are led by women, right? I think it's around 90% of single parent families are led by women. So I think that this notion of a male breadwinner, like whilst I can comprehend where it comes from, I think the importance is also instilling particular values into women so that they also have the agency. And I think in general, when we look at like economic justice and gender equality and also like the gender pay gap more broadly, like everyone benefits when women are doing well because of the fact that most families, when you think about single parent families, for example, are led by women, and these are the women who are raising the next generation of men and women, do you know what I mean, who are then going to go on to lead our society. I also think what's particularly interesting is like this notion around men being encouraged to be more emotional and to be more vulnerable. And I completely agree with that. I think that's really important. I think there's like many benefits that can translate across society, right? But at the same time, when I hear this notion, I'm like, it's so interesting because women for so long have been penalized for being too emotional. Like women will have barriers in the workplace and they'll be like, oh, because that woman's too emotional, or she doesn't have the capacity because women are too hormonal or it's biological. And we're now at a stage in society where we're encouraging men to be more emotional. And I hope that that also translates to removing that barrier for women so that actually both genders feel liberated enough to express themselves in their own authentic way.
You ask, is there a space for men to feel that they can be emotional and be vulnerable? The answer is no, because we're having gender wars. And when there's gender wars, it's me against you. It's a battle. And so the men are fed up and really confused and paralysed because they don't really know what to do because they don't know what women want anymore. And for example, the times are changing, and I'm sorry to say, but men are incredibly intimidated by women having high standards these days. But it's because women are now really standing in their power and kind of realising that, like, say, for example, what your grandmother settled for back in the day with your granddad is not enough to get by these days. You know, he did the bare minimum and brought the bacon home and she smiled and said, oh, he's great. But nowadays, it's different. Times are changing. We have a cost of living crisis. There's so many other things that really affect us in our day-to-day lives, and women are really like levelling up and just kind of exceeding at quite a high speed. And men have just put their hands up and gone, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to keep up. We don't know how to impress women. What do women want these days? And so the more we have these gender wars, the more men are going to take a backseat. Because I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but when you go out, men are not approaching women anymore, right? And I have male clients. They book sessions with me. They come and tell me, we don't know how to speak to women anymore. We don't know how to flirt. We don't know what women want. No one's happy. You know, everyone's getting ghosted. no one's really got any money, like nothing's happening, no dates are being planned. Everybody is fed up. And so men are going into their little shell because they don't know what to do. And when they don't know what to do, and when things don't feel familiar to them, they're like, okay, we're opting out. And it's because of the pressures. It's the pressures of showing up, the pressures of being this alpha male, you know, Andrew Tate guy, and they just don't know what to do.
You raised so many great things there. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that men are not dating anymore, so at least it's not just me. But I think when you mentioned cost of living crisis, I think that's an important factor that's kind of changed a lot. I feel like previously men's concept of masculinity was rooted in their ability to provide materially or economically. So when you remove that, you have to, it's actually a whole requirement to transform what you consider to be a man. And that is a lifelong journey in itself. I think there is like an identity crisis in itself, which is very much to do with the economic system that we're in. But I think when people don't realize that, as you said, the gender wars come because now you think it's like us against them when really it's society's forceful removal of that, you know, that identity. So any other themes that you feel like is the cause of this kind of like shift?
Yeah, can I just come in there? And I believe me, I understand that we're in like a cost of living crisis. But at the same time, men earn 13% more than women. And the vast majority of the most low-paid sectors are filled by women. And I think social media is a really important point, right? Because I've seen the gender wars on social media and like they are so toxic and divisive. Like it's really horrible to see. But in real life, like, you know, men still do earn more. And whatever a woman's standards are her standards. If there's someone else who has the same standards that you can provide for, or that match where you're at, that's a perfect match. But what I don't want to ever do is vilify women for having particular standards that make them happy. Like as long as that person's happy and they're not harming anyone, like, yeah, I can't say anything about it.
Do you feel like that's an interesting take on it actually, and I'm sure like many people might agree. Our preferences are shaped by society, right? They're not necessarily intrinsic to us. So to what degree can women have preferences, but also we can recognize the additional pressures it might place on men, not in a way to reduce our standards, but maybe there's a conversation that we can have or communication where it's like, actually, I have these standards for myself, but if we are in some cases earning more, not necessarily more than them, maybe there's another way that they could provide for us that will be, because we see a lot on social media about women going, I don't need you to be a rich man, I just need you to have emotional intelligence. I would like to know what you think about that.
I feel like women have standards for a reason. They're not trying to make it difficult for men. I've noticed my standards get higher and higher the more I date because you learn to protect yourself. When I was younger, I was really, really naive and I got into some relationships where I got really, really badly hurt. And then I didn't date for about 3-4 years. Like I went on dates, but I didn't have a relationship for a long time. But I do feel like social media can have quite a negative impact on women, and I see it with my friends in terms of setting certain standards where they're like, if they wanted to, they would. And there's certain videos of men asking girls to be their girlfriends, and it's like a whole
thing.
Party on the beach.
In the hotel
and women
room.
see that and they're like, well, this woman's getting that, so I should have that standard. So I think it's all about knowing, having self-respect, having self-worth is the biggest thing. So knowing what you want from a relationship from a person, not necessarily all about the materialistic things, but just self-respect from somebody. And once you have that, then little things don't matter as much.
I do social media as like my job in terms of like earning my income and alongside acting. And the whole social media space in terms of the marketing and like brand deals and partnerships, a lot of it is very female driven in terms of the foundations, who's working behind the team, who's like working behind the social for whatever brand's page. And when it comes to PR, I know that girls get like an insane amount of PR. And a lot of the time, stereotypically, men don't really care for PR, but I do. When I speak to a lot of my peers, a lot of women actually earn way more than men in terms of social media, in terms of brand deals and partnerships. And I know a big part of that is because in consumerism, women spend more money in general. So when it comes to doing paid partnerships, I've had situations in the past where brands have actually said, oh, we'd love you to be on this campaign, but now we're going to pull you out. We're going to have just a whole female-led partnership. And it's something I was excited about, but it's quite frustrating knowing that now that it's kind of been, I kind of feel like my creativity and like my relevancy in a way kind of like being stripped away based on the stereotype that, oh, because you don't wear makeup or because you're not at all these events that are going on, you now don't necessarily feel like you can be a part of that community. And that's not me saying that I'm like bombarding and like getting involved in what's not mine. But, you know, social media is known to be a space where you should be, you know, be open and be free and share your creativity. And I feel like when it is like very female led, in some cases, unfortunately, sometimes I feel like some of the brands are seen through the lens of a woman and not from like a man's point of view.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you resonate with that type of like, there are some, I guess, industries where it's not that clear that actually men could feel disadvantaged in some way?
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we have particular industries in mind or the aggregate, and therefore it doesn't really talk about the layered, detailed nuances.
Yeah.
That actually in some industries, a lot of men maybe actually are, like, as I said, disenfranchised in some way. Do you kind of feel that way in any industry that you're in?
For sure. As a creative myself who works in the creative industry, particularly as a black male, even touching on race a little bit in a very white male dominated or even white female dominated, I feel like I have to work harder. And particularly from the background I come from, and I have to sometimes feel like I have to make sure I don't dress like I'm like a typical boy in London, like a road man in London, or dress as creative as I can to show them, oh, I can still do this. Obviously, with filling diversity quotas, it's still paving the way for me as a straight male in this industry, because sometimes in certain industries, if you're a black male coming in, you kind of have to be a bit different for you to really get the certain job opportunity or the role. But I feel like we're in a space right now where people are not gatekeeping as much. For example, like a black male in a leading space will put other people on, not just black people, but other males or other females of different races as well. And I'm fortunate enough to even be in the right place I am and the time I am, particularly with my co-workers. It may not be as diverse, but just me being there can do a lot to people to learn and unlearn.
It's interesting that you're saying that, like, especially around like the racialized stereotype aspect, because when you think about black women, for example, black women tend to do better like in employment if there's some sort of like racial strategy or there's like a people of color strategy around like empowering ethnic minorities in the workplace, but they don't do as well when it's like a gender empowerment program, which is interesting. Usually it's only white women that benefit from those kinds of programs, whereas with race-related programs, it's black men and black women that benefit.
This is where the intersectionality conversation comes in, right? Because particularly for black women, we talk about this all the time. I'm sure we talk about this with our friends, family. It's a topic of conversation at any point. So I think with us, it's like when it comes to feminism, there's that inequity within feminism. That means that we're not the typical woman that they have in mind when they do these initiatives. So when it comes to it, they're not designed to actually elevate those at the bottom of let's say the women hierarchy. So it's like you do women and everyone thinks like, yeah, all women, but we know that unless you're very specific about who you're trying to help, or if your initiative is not trying to help the most vulnerable of that demographic, then only the ones at the top will have those small gains. And I think when it comes to race, I guess we all live in like a system where obviously it's racialized, there's a racial hierarchy and a gendered hierarchy as well, but also when it comes to the idea of fear, who people fear, they probably fear black men a lot more than they fear black women sometimes. So it's a lot easier for them to elevate black women in those spaces, or it's designed for black women in those spaces. And you know, we perform really well academically and all these other indicators of the system that we're in the West, where we can really perform. And then that's where some of our black men are left behind, because when it comes to exclusions in schools and all that kind of stuff, that's where, you know, things start to change. And now black women who try twice as hard and do all that kind of stuff in spite of the system, at what cost? Our mental health and everything, to get our flowers, and most of our men are kind of left behind in that way. So I think there's that weirdness where we sit in between those two spaces, and then it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like I'm so grateful that we're doing well, but then our black men are not doing well. When it's white women, we kind of feel like it's not happening. So yeah.
Just to come back on the point as well that you mentioned around how men may feel like there are barriers in the social media is like super interesting for me. But it also made me think like why is there such a push for like female-led content, etc. And like you said, like women tend to buy more of these like products, right? But at the same time, like why do women tend to buy more of these products? And it's because women tend to be sexualized by men, right? So like even in terms of economic barriers, again, it's women who spend more on these like consumerism products to change their appearance. And a lot of this comes from wanting to fit a particular male gaze. So it's like a cyclical kind of reinforcing issue. Yeah, that happens, yeah.
I feel like I just want to add on to the whole women are heavily sexualized. Having a career as a journalist, TV presenter, when I first started out, I was so confused as to why I had to dress a certain way on a TV show. And then as the years went on in my career, I started realizing, oh, I need to wear a short dress. I need to wear short skirts. I need to show my legs. The camera is a certain angle. And then also, like, when it came to getting paid, I realized, like, I'd be getting paid less than the male TV presenter. It was so frustrating for me because I knew that I had the skills and I knew I was really talented and I knew what I was worth, but I had to accept low offers when I was starting out. And everything I did was almost just kind of like for the male gaze. It's like, you're on TV, but you have to look good, you have to attract the man. It is changing, but not really, because like you said, we're still having to buy from these brands because it's this whole narrative that like women want to look good for men. When, you know, I would argue I like to look good for myself. I look in the mirror, I want to look good in the mirror for myself. Do you feel like you need to prove yourself in your industry?
I think it's a mixture of race and gender on social media. A lot of Black influencers, unfortunately, come across very unprofessional, which makes it harder for the other creators who are actually doing well to actually put their foot in the door. And being a male, there are some creators that I've seen online who are either podcasters, similarly to like Andrew Tate and things, and they over-sexualize women a lot. And it's unfortunate because it puts a bad taste in, you know, other people's mouths for other people who aren't not like that at all. I'm someone who's very passionate about equality and women's rights. And for me to have sisters also at home, I know what they go through. And it's unfortunate when you have, you know, some creators who are male creators who are put on a pedestal, use their platforms to, you know, spew just unnecessary comments that are misogynist and are just not fair. I've had many times where I've been on live and someone says, do you have any thoughts about this? And honestly, I don't make any comments regarding that because unfortunately you say one thing and then
it's cut.
Shit, you know what I mean? So for me, I feel like I just do, even though sometimes I do want to voice my opinion and show people that I actually do care for, you know, women and, you know, just our community in general, I just do what I can to just show myself as being the best person I can be, that can be trustworthy. Being a creator comes with a lot of responsibility and unfortunately, you know, people are waiting on the warpath for you to do something wrong.
That's a really interesting take, especially on the impact of, or sometimes feeling the pressure to represent.
Yeah.
You know, and are you as an individual? To what degree are we our genders and our race, and what part are we an individual? And it feels like that discussion loses us in so many ways because we're so much more than that. But before we get into like maybe exploring that more, it would be really good to find about your experience, maybe in like the workplace and how you've navigated that.
So I work in the fitness industry, and something I've experienced is, again, a lot of sexualization as a woman, as a personal trainer. I've had it where I've been trying to get clients and trying to sell my services, and the amount of men that have looked at me and been like, oh, can you be my personal trainer? Or I'm trying to get like new members into the gym, and they're like, oh, I'll join if you train me. And it's sort of, again, that sense of not being taken seriously, and it never makes me feel good. And again, it's sad, it's like, okay, I could get paying clients through this, but they're not training with me because I'm a good personal trainer. They're training with me because I look nice. And I guess that is the element of it, is that, you know, you kind of buy into people's look at the end of the day. But I overall love the fitness industry. It's very welcoming. I feel like it's very positive, a lot of very like healthy people, but I have felt a lot of sexualization just being a woman in fitness.
If you could I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about, is that people think that those type of compliments are empowering to women.
Yeah,
and sometimes you see people say it and you think I'm on here. So sometimes online, as I said, I do like political content. I'll be talking about humanitarian crises and someone will be like, oh, I was mesmerized by your face. I'm like, sir, can you donate to this cause? What would you actually say about like how it makes us feel as people? Could be any gender that it happens to. But what would you want to tell them?
So I don't mind being hit on by a man. There's nothing wrong with finding somebody attractive. That's normal. It's the way you go about it. And I think when it's really objectifying, and I think it's the way that some people can look at the other, like if there's a lot of staring involved and they're like, oh, like, I don't know what certain language involved, but I think it's definitely the way it's portrayed, like when you're attracted to somebody. I don't want to just say it's men, because obviously it can be women as well, but if it's very animalistic, it does make you feel, me personally, it makes me feel really disgusting. And I just feel, kind of quite small. And I just feel kind of powerless. And I feel almost like a statue. And as someone that works very hard, and I've worked hard for the qualifications that I have, for them just to be like, oh, you look pretty, like, you know, I'll train with you because you're pretty. It's just so like, it makes me feel so small. I'm like, no, I'm an intelligent woman. Like, take me seriously, you know.
Women are moving further to the left and men are moving further to the right. It's happening. We're starting to see that kind of the things that we mentioned before, like how the economy is hitting us differently, or some of the policies that were implemented are now coming up in our politics, and we're seeing all these different interesting characters come up. For me, it makes sense because I feel as though women empowerment, feminism, right? The idea is that we're trying to dismantle the patriarchy. But the patriarchy was rooted in the idea of women's subjugation towards men. So when you try and shift things, it means that although people are being empowered, some people, you have to rebalance things. And that rebalancing is where the conflict is happening. But at least it reveals that when women weren't at the top or when women weren't doing as well, it wasn't because we lacked skill. It wasn't because we didn't try. It's because this system that puts men on top had to be done in that way. And now they're worried about the outcomes of that. So for me, it's very much really telling that if men were going to rise to the top of there has to be a patriarchy, it's rooted in the subordination of women. And when you want to change that, that's when people are complaining. I think women are a good testament to, in spite of the barriers in front of us, we will excel. We looked at the barriers that were in front of us and we figured out how to overcome them, and we built a sisterhood. But women are building these things where we're trying to become more independent from men. So I think that's what's scaring people, because now men are like, so how can I help you when you've got all these sisters around you? And it's like, well, you can learn from us now. So, you know, before you get radicalized online, maybe you need to develop a brotherhood. Maybe you need to talk to more men, because if one thing we know, the patriarchy hurts men more than it has ever hurt a woman.
I think it's actually important that some men who want to get more knowledge about how women feel should actually grow and build their relationship with more women as opposed to men. And I say that from my experience as well, because in terms of my audience demographic, my audience are mainly women. And I have sisters and I have a lot of female friends. I have a balance of male and female friends, but the women that are in my life, including my family, my immediate family, they are people who have actually gone through situations and gone through problems. And I think you can learn a lot from them. Women would like to be protected, yes, but at the same time also they want emotional intelligence. You know, like, yes, you can buy, you know, a girl a Porsche right now or take her to Harrods, but at the same time, can you actually ask her if she's doing okay? And I think a lot of men can't do that, do you know what I mean? And I actually went through hell at home because, you know, I had 3 sisters and we grew up together, and there was like quiet times, there was like crazy times, but I was able to understand the wavelengths and the frequencies of how they are as women, you know? And yes, they say women are quite emotional, but at the same time, there's a reason as to why, because it's rooted within the society that we live in. And as I'm getting older right now, I'm realizing to be more open to listen. And even for me as well, I feel like when it comes to women in general, there'll be time where I'm walking down the street at night and a woman will actually cross the road, and it makes me feel upset because I'm not going to hurt you. Do you know what I mean? But it's because of the unfortunate toxic foundation that's been rooted in society from day dot, because men are not willing to listen, and when men are not willing to be open and actually like be supportive, you know what I mean? And I think if men actually go to the source, which is women, and actually listen, not having any agenda, but just to listen to what they want to say, I feel like there could be more equality and more understanding within the community and within society in general.
I definitely, for sure, I think touching on that, just men being able to, just emotional intelligence is a key thing. I watched this podcast by a guy called Jason Williams, and I think that's his name. He talks a lot about like, when it comes to men processing emotions, all they know is anger, whereas women has a whole plethora of emotions, but men need to realize that you can also feel these emotions as well. You can feel jealousy, you can cry, you can feel sadness. We're in a good time where there's good things, like there's boys do cry and there's many good mental health resources. But sadly, I don't know if you guys seen the TV show Adolescence. Things like OnlyFans or pornography, just to be transparent, has really tainted young boys' views of women, because they just said, oh, you're my object of pleasure. So when the sad thing is when men are going through time, how they cope. Not a lot of them speak to each other. They just go to porn or have this like little kind of like fantasy in this woman that you don't even know. but like that's their way of coping, which is so sad.
Yeah.
And not to spoil the TV show, but just knowing the TV show, like that was the boys' upbringing. They weren't the popular boys with the cool who can play football, do this. They were just the rejects in school. And how they deal with it is that they'll have this little corner. They have their own community. And they will just like kind of victimize women, not victimize women, but not say it to the face, but comment with stuff and like, and that's also a reason why a lot of men are moving to the far right, because they've been rejected, they've had enough. And then they're questioning, oh, the women are going far left, we're just going to go far right. And that also encourages more gender wars. So there's layers to it.
Just one more thing to add as well. I think if men are more open to actually having these relationships, healthy relationships with other women, I feel like women will feel more protected more. Because I think when men see women as just this objectified, seeing them as this sexual figure, or just seeing them in a way that is not making them feel seen or heard, women won't go to men as like their first point of contact to be like, you're my confidant, let me actually speak to you and tell you how I'm feeling. But I feel like if men in general are willing just to be open and not have any agenda and just be open to listening to what women want to say and actually be friends, and not as in friends as in with benefits, friends as in friends, there's actually so much power that can be done when a woman's actually in the room. I'm not speaking for myself, because I do feel like I do have quite some good intellect, but I do feel like when it comes to a lot of men just think one way, but women do have several layers, as you said, to finding a solution. And I think that's the reason why a lot of men don't like explore the idea of there could be something else. So yeah, I think men should block out the noise of this idea that women's voices don't matter, because they can actually help them get somewhere.
So obviously what we're seeing kind of now is that the gender roles are really changing, right? We were all probably kind of brought up with this idea that the man goes out, works hard, brings home the bacon, and the woman sits at home and she bakes all day and she looks after the children, right? It's just what we all know. But now people's opinions and views and way of life are changing. So what are your opinions on it?
I think it's actually gone a lot better. Everyone's entrepreneurial, especially on TikTok. You swipe up and there's like some new TikTok sound of like, oh, hey, come with me to my client, get their hair done. Even men as well being entrepreneurial. And we feel like we're in a time where a man doesn't always have to be the breadwinner. Like he can work a freelance job, but there's now flexibility where it's like, okay, you can pay 50-50, or he can be a stay-at-home dad. We've unlearned that it doesn't have to be the man that just has to come home. But we live in a time where there's just nuances.
I think also like we have to be realistic, because like inflation is inflating like God knows what in this day and age. And you know, if somebody's now made redundant who's a male, that doesn't make him less of a man. Same as a woman. But I do feel like, yeah, we have to be realistic, because, you know, nowadays it's not how it used to be before. Hustle culture is a big thing. And, you know, I've noticed that in America as well a lot. They're really on their hustle game. And I think it's a really good thing that a lot of young people are getting it into their system now, because, you know, everybody wants generational wealth, you know, and unfortunately we're living in times now where trying to get a job on Indeed is like, it's literally like the lottery. So I think people need to just realize that like, it's not real life. And, you know, at the same time, I think we should also, I know sometimes we see like, you know, when people say, oh, I'm just a girl on social media, or your soft life and stuff like that. We need to know like when is a cut-off point to like stop having these jokes, because it gets to the point where it becomes so normal to the point where it's, okay, cool, you're just a girl. Okay, so what does that make me? Even though we know that it's fun for, you know, people to be making fun out of, you know, gender roles in terms of, oh, I'm just a girl, I don't need to do that. Or, you know, men used to go to the war, those type of comments. It can be fun to an extent, but we need to actually identify when it becomes the norm. Because I think sometimes subconsciously we'd be listening to these things and these jokes and getting taking part in these jokes, not knowing that this is actually the reason why we are not moving forward as a community and as a society. Things are changing, society is changing, politics are changing, everything's changing. So, and as that changes, we must adapt to that change too, which means that, you know, some things may not necessarily be as they used to be before. You know, sometimes if a woman wants to wear the trousers and the man stays at home and looks after the kids, it's a win-win. The man has a good relationship with his children, you know? The mum, even though she goes to work, the children will always know who their mum is. But a child always needs a protector. So it's important to, adapt and not be scared of change.
Yeah, those are some great points, actually. And I think one thing that we can all agree on is that we need a healthier discourse around this, so we can all just prop up a society where we don't have all these gender-based barriers. And for me personally, I feel like if I was to envision a future that was a lot better in the context of gender, it would be one where, you know, someone's quality of life isn't directly rooted in the gender they identify with. I think that's the most important thing, is that you're not more likely to suffer from something because of your gender or gender-based violence or femicide or even mental health. I think it's important for us to embrace even gender fluidity, right? I think there's many different ways we're all showing up, and we're not bound by these rigid boxes that actually perpetuate the system. As much as we're all victims of a system, I think there's an accountability level there. And in that vision that I would love to have, I think it's also for women as well to see how our new status in society is impacting men. And I feel like I always try and stray away from the idea when we talk about women's rights or women's empowerment, we have to kind of be like, and what about the men? Because we're so used to being like, you have to bring them in. But it's clear that there's a conversation being had that we're not privy to. And no matter if it's true or not, they are internalizing something. And unless we have that communication, there's no point being right when you're not communicating, because we, you know what I mean, like when you're just shouting, they say when two people argue, no one knows who the fool is, right? So we need to be able to have that discourse for us to move forward and for our children's children, the next generation. So I'd love to pose it to you. What does like a future, right, in the context of gender that we would love to live in?
I feel like more conversations like this, more open communication, more kind of discussing what we can do as a collective to kind of overcome these issues, rather than just going, right, we're in a gender war, it's me against you. How about you learn what women want? How about you learn what men are looking for? How about we all do self-development? How about we all go on healing journeys? How about we take this stuff seriously? And men need to start realizing, okay, it's time to forget about the patriarchy and what the patriarchy told you, because the patriarchy told you that you need to suppress your emotions and you need to perform this unrealistic expectation of what masculinity is, but none of you are happy. All of you are empty and miserable and walking around like robots, really and truly. So get out of this system, okay? Because the patriarchy has damaged you. It's made you entitled. It's made you see women as sexual objects. It hasn't given you a fair chance in life. And now we have things like the male loneliness epidemic. But it's because men have brought it on themselves. It's nothing to do with women. Women are here trying to reach you guys, trying to feel you guys, trying to connect with you guys. But the patriarchy told you that you needed to suppress your emotions, that you needed to perform masculinity 24/7, and you can't be vulnerable and you can't surrender. Well, now we have these problems. So if we start now, and the younger you are, the better, right? And this is why I feel like Gen Z have got a great start at this, and this is why they seem to be having more better relationships and connections with people, because they have more knowledge and they want to learn and they want the tools and they want to, you know, Gen Z are doing therapy. So let's move with the times. Men, it's okay to seek help. It is not okay to suffer. There is no shame in seeking therapy, in getting a mindset coach, in doing things like that, okay? So I think once we do that, people are going to start feeling a bit more like, okay, we can connect with each other. Because there really is a wall, because men are not allowing women to reach them. They have this idea that, like, you know, if I tell a woman about my true emotions, she's going to use them against me. She's going to weaponize them. But this is what the patriarchy told them. Women actually want men to open up. Women actually protect a man's spirit. They want you to drop the mask and be real with them.
I would say a safer environment for men and a safer environment for women, right? Because when you look at who most men are murdered by, like, they're mostly murdered by men. And when you look at who most women are murdered by, they're mostly murdered by men, right? So just taking it back, like, right to the root, like, just safer environments for both is in thinking about why is it that, for example, a woman walking at home at night, if she sees another man, might cross the streets because she's worried about that she might be in danger. Why is it that, I think you mentioned before, like, men who are rejected might move towards the right? Like, why is there this entitlement, I guess, for access to women? A woman should never be scared of rejecting a man. I mean, there are obviously ways that you can say it, but you should never be scared of saying that you're not interested in someone, because that's your own person, it's your own body, and it's your own personal space. So when I'm speaking about safety, I literally mean, like, being able to go out and do whatever the hell you want to do without being in fear of, like, whether you're going to get home that same night or not. And that goes to men and women because most perpetrators of violence are men. So just taking it back straight to that root, like just a healthier and safer environment for both men and women, essentially.
I think before everyone steps in, I just want to make a really big point before we move on. I mentioned before about gender fluidity and different gender identifications, right? And we have to be, we talk about safety and we talk about the trans community.
You're right, yeah.
That's a really big community that we have, that we can't forget in this discussion. I know my privilege as a heteronormative, the gender I was assigned at birth is the gender I identify with, and therefore, even as a woman, I have a privilege in a society where my gender is recognized in a particular way. So we must also remember how the patriarchy does affect all these different people. Women do contribute to the patriarchy. There's no such thing as a patriarchy where the woman does not prop that up. We've always been collaborators with it, whether intentionally or not intentionally. So I just want to make sure, as we move forward with this conversation, or as people have these conversations elsewhere, that we don't perpetuate those binaries. There's more than one gender involved. Safety is for all of us, and we all prop up. It's all in our best interest to dismantle the patriarchy. So I just don't want to forget like our trans brothers and sisters and gender neutral family in this conversation as well, because they're not here to represent themselves. And I wouldn't want a society where, again, it's heteronormative, it's gender bias again. So that's just my 2 pence in it.
I think for me, it would be a society where, like you said, there's no gender wars. People aren't against each other. Women aren't trying to come against men, and men feel, I guess, less threatened by women. It would be nice seeing media where it's more representative of, genders doing different things to kind of, again, break the patriarchy and break that down. Men being more open to having therapy and listening to women and not feeling the need to be this alpha male, and actually just, it's okay to be emotional and open up.
I think a key thing what will help societies, like you said, representation and media. I feel like even on the flip side of like the male gaze, like people might be divided on this. I feel like the representation of men, even in the Bible movie, like Ken was a bit like thick-skinned, like he was a bit stupid in the way he was, and like there wasn't really a balance. But obviously, that was obviously like a reaction to like hypermasculinity and like patriarchy, which is obviously understandable. And it's also people who are in the spaces such as yourself or you, Ehiz, really representing well and having these conversations and creating safe spaces. We live in a time where there's just been a revival, particularly in spirituality and religion, whereas men and women have had enough. When they feel rejected, they lose themselves. There's no one to go to, and then they find themselves in like a church or a place of worship, and then they find community there. I know for me, like I find a real community in my church, and of course people are learning and unlearning in terms of representation of men and women in the church, but in a time where like I can have a normal conversation with a female and it doesn't have to be anyone trying to flirt or anything, but just making friendships, making friends, and also building these strong communities. And particularly definitely in media and having these right conversations, and also for young people, just really to gather together in a safe environment and to talk it out. Men need to talk it out and not always just come together just to like play games and just like see who's matchup.
Me as a creator, as an online content creator and someone who's a public figure, it's important that I, make sure that I put out the right message. There's a saying that says, whoever controls the media controls the mind. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are out there who've been put on a pedestal, they have an opinion and they have a way of a method of approach that unfortunately people don't have a mind of their own, and they want to go and follow that, idea of thinking, which isn't always the greatest, which can lead to, unfortunately, toxic, conversations and things like that. But yeah, I think people should be more collaborative, and people should also understand that I am a man, you may be a woman, or you may have your own gender that you identify with, and we have our own qualities. That doesn't make us any different, that doesn't make us any less, but we can work together to see how we can both create a unit that can help society be a better place.
Well, I don't know about you, I thought that was a really good discussion. It was good to hear all your individual experiences and all the things that you've seen online, but in your respective careers. And I feel like, again, we all share an ideal or vision for society where our genders are not a setback, but they complement each other or the individual that we choose to interact with in whichever way. So thank you again for this fruitful conversation. Thanks for watching. This has been Roundtable on 48 TV.